OSR community. And it does not represent the views of the Utah OSR Land Co-op, its board of directors, its founder, Philip Gleason, the Bureau of Land Management, the state of Utah, the Trump administration, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I just wanted to make that clear up front. These are my ideas, okay? So it's not official. The gospel according to Jesse, I guess. My journey towards Zion began with a deep burning desire to seek after it regardless of the cost. I'm going to tell you a story about how that desire grew in me. 49 years ago, when I was 14, my sister married a man from Salt Lake City. Yes.
I don't hear you coming out of the ceiling.
I do. No, is this better?
Yeah, there you go.
He's holding nice. My sister married a man from Salt Lake City. What?
I love you, Jesse.
Can you hold it down? I'm trying to present here. Where was I? So I was 14 at the time, and to this day, I have no idea why she gave me a wedding present. I don't understand, but she did. And what she gave me was this book. It's a novel written in 1898 by a fellow by the name of Nessie Anderson. Weird name. 1898. And in this book, it's kind of, I'll bet you that Lex Azevedo got the idea for Saturday's Warrior from this book. It's a serious version of Saturday's Warrior, much longer story. And in it, the main character gives the king of Poland a tour of the New Jerusalem Zion Society. And I'm like, okay, cool. I want to live there. When I was reading that. So the description of that Zion Society captured my imagination, and I yearned to live in such a world where there was no crime, no poverty, and a very just government led by the Savior himself, a world where truth reigned. So the reason this account so spoke to me was about 3 years earlier, when I was 10 or 11, I read this book. This None Dare to Call It Conspiracy is a political book written by journalist Gary Allen with the input of a congressman. It was published in 1971 and quickly became a bestseller within conservative circles. I think it was after the publication of this book where the leftists started saying, well, you're just a conspiracy theorist. This is where that came from, I think. Anyway, this book argues that powerful international financiers and political insiders operating through institutions like the press, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Federal Reserve deliberately steer both liberal and conservative movements to erode national sovereignty and individual freedoms. So reading this book, and then 3 years later reading this one, I said, I want to live in this kind of world. So I did not want to live in the world that None Dare Call It Conspiracy described. So when I read about the New Jerusalem Zion Society and added upon, I decided that was the type of world I wanted to live in. I remember, this will tickle your funny bone. I remember promising God, so remember I'm 14, I promised God and myself that I was willing to crawl backwards all the way to the New Jerusalem if I had to. Now I'm 63. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to follow through with that promise. So with the spirit of Zion burning in my heart, I've spent my entire adult life keeping an eye out for more Zion-like ways of organizing our social institutions so that they would be better approximate the kind of society a loving God would want for his children to enjoy while we live here in mortality. And I found a few examples along the way. For example, when I went to BYU when I went back to BYU in 1991 to finish my bachelor's degree in mathematics education of all things, I was introduced to what I believe is a more Zion-like way of doing education. I had a professor, Larry Arnoldson, who admitted to me that he was in education to get people out of it. And it worked. I'm out. I did teach for 2 years, worst 2 years of my life. I was a favorite teacher the second year, but I had to go on antidepressants to finish the year. Anyway, it was rough. He introduced me to alternative approaches to education that were more freedom-based and less compulsion-based. Educational approaches that respected the interests of the students and not the interests of the curriculum development companies. He shared story after story of how he had personally implemented these types of approaches and wonderful results that he achieved in a classroom as a classroom teacher in various high schools where he had taught or consulted. With that influence, I was then prepared for the next logical step, what I've come to call freedom-based education. And you kind of wonder, okay, so compulsion versus freedom, whose plans were those? As invented by the founders of a private school in the town of Sudbury, Massachusetts, the Sudbury Valley School, set up in the late 60s by some hippies. This very unique private school is still going strong 56 years later. It offers a self-directed, democratic education where students of all ages have complete freedom to choose how they spend their time all day, every day, with no mandatory classes or curriculum. No bells, no homework, no uncomfortable desks. The school is governed by a direct democracy in which the students and staff have equal votes on all matters, including the rules and hiring. And so you think, okay, that's going to be chaos, right? Not a chance. What's most amazing about this type of education is that it has remarkable results. I bought a book that they had surveyed all their graduates, and it had all the results of all their surveys, and I crunched the numbers myself and discovered 4 amazing things about this. All the children learn to take 100% of the responsibility for their own education. They all learn to read. They all learn to do math. In fact, what's weird is that none of their students who start there ever develop dyslexia. Not one. The theory is that the kids don't even try to read until their brains are wired for it. And it's the compulsion-based education that pushes them to read when they're not ready, and dyslexia kicks in. They don't know if that's true, but that's their theory. Anyway, their graduates who choose to go on to college get into the college of their first or second choice, and those who do attend college are much more likely to actually finish their bachelor's degree and statistically more likely to get further education. And lastly, the part that I think is the absolute most remarkable, and I think which ought to be a selling point, and that is their graduates are 14 times more likely than a traditional school student graduate. 14 times, that's 1,400% more likely to start their own business by the time they're 30. I just think that's absolutely amazing. We could have, instead of having unemployment lines, we could have the opposite. Anyway. So I worked with others to set up 2 of these Sudbury-style schools in Utah County, the first one back in the early 90s, and then again in 2015 in Lehigh. And I absolutely loved doing the work, and the only paycheck I received was joy. By the way, if you're still a fan of traditional public compulsion-based education, I'd invite you to watch this video I posted on Vimeo.com that documents the history of the American public education system. It'll surprise you who got it started and why. But I'm not here to talk about freedom-based education. My point in bringing all this up is to give you an example of what I consider to be a more Zion-like way of organizing one of our social institutions. In my opinion, our social institutions either push us toward Zion or it pushes us towards Babylon. It can't do neutral. The term Zion has been used by LDS leaders and members in a variety of ways. However, personally, I prefer the way the Lord defines Zion in the Scriptures. And the Lord called his people Zion because, 3 reasons: they were of one heart and one mind. In other words, they had a common purpose and dwelt in righteousness. In other words, no crime, and they were doing good works. And the last one is, and there was no poor among them. And that's because they kicked them all out, right? I'm not kidding. I had a bishop, and that was his approach. I'm not kidding. Kick the poor people out. The early LDS leaders would refer to this as economic unity. And it has nothing to do with redistribution of wealth. We'll talk about that in a minute. Speaking of economic unity, in preparation for writing my book, Champions for Zion, I have a box of 5 of those, in case anybody wants one. I ran across a fascinating letter signed by Brigham Young and his 12 apostles. It was essentially, this was in 1875, it was essentially the equivalent of a First Presidency letter. It's quite long, huge paragraphs. The last 3 sentences of this document says this, quote, this will blow your mind: "Does not all our history impress upon us the great truth that in union is strength? Without it, what power would we Latter-day Saints have? But it is not in doctrines alone that we should be united, but in practice, and especially in our business affairs." Can you imagine being one in our business affairs? Now, that's not a one-off declaration. The brethren shared their goal of economic unity on multiple occasions over multiple decades, so it isn't a flash in the pan. Here's one from George Buchanan, who was counselor to 3 prophets. This is from the October 1882 General Conference. Quote, "That condition is upon us, the growth of wealth in the hands of a few individuals, threatening us with greater danger today than anything that can be done by outsiders. I know that this is true. God does not design that there shall be classes among us, one class lifted up above another, one class separated from the rest of the people with diverse interests that are not strictly in accord with those of the masses of the people. Because when this is the case, there is a lack of union. God designs in the organization of his kingdom on the earth to prevent this. If it is not prevented, then the design of God is not established." Pretty clear. Here's Orson Pratt, April 1855 General Conference, 27 years earlier. Quote, "But the day will come when there will be no poor in Zion. But the Lord will make them equal in earthly things, that they may be equal in obtaining heavenly things." That's a quote right out of the D&C, by the way. That is, according to his notion of equality, and not according to our narrow, contracted view of the same. Then 19 years earlier, in the October 1876 General Conference, as president of the Quorum of the 12, John Taylor said, quote, "Then let us practice honesty and diligence in our various callings, seeking unity, and to cultivate the spirit of brotherhood financially as well as spiritually." See, in the church today, when we talk about building Zion, it's always the spiritual level, and we ignore the temporal side of things. In fact, when I was doing the research, I've gathered thousands of quotes about building Zion from the early LDS leaders, and they did not use the term economic the way we use it, or economy the way we use it. To us, the economy is the production and distribution of goods and services. They used the word temporal, in temporal matters. Then let us practice honesty and diligence in our various callings, seeking unity, to cultivate the spirit of brotherhood financially as well as spiritually, that we may be in readiness upon call to go forth and build up the center stake of Zion. I found nearly 100 more quotes that make it obvious that the brethren thought economic unity among the saints was crucially important to establishing Zion. How come you've never heard this? In contrast, Babylon represents competitive free enterprise, commonly called capitalism, which Americans equate with free enterprise, and they're actually two different things, but that we could argue about that for hours. Competitive free enterprise, which fosters division and inequality rather than unity and cooperation. Since its inception in the 1600s, capitalism has resulted over and over again in massive division between the rich and the poor, which resulted in the French Revolution, where the aristocracy and the wealthy elites controlled most of the land and the wealth. The common people, especially the peasants and urban workers, were overtaxed and underfed. Then the Russian Revolution, where under Tsarist rule and early industrial capitalism there, a small elite owned almost all the land and industry. Workers and peasants lived in extreme poverty. And here in America, during the Gilded Age, where a few super wealthy industrialists, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, controlled vast wealth and monopolies. Laborers worked in unsafe and underpaid conditions, and urban poverty exploded. Luckily, we didn't have a revolution. It led to major social unrest, strikes, and very heavy-handed response to those strikes, and eventually to political reforms. That division between rich and poor threatens to engulf the U.S. in the same conflict today, as it is becoming nearly impossible for our younger generations to afford the basics of life. That is, if the work they can do isn't taken over by AI. So today, the top 1% of Americans own about a third of the total wealth. The bottom 50 own just 2.5%. The top 10% control over 70% of the wealth. Economic system has huge advantages, and we can implement the same program today and enjoy the same benefits. So, how this all got started, the problem was that in the Utah Territory, merchants from back east were bringing wagon loads of goods from New York and back east, and mark them up 400, 500, 600%, and it was draining the capital out of the Utah Territory. And Brigham said, "Hey, we can't do this. This is unsustainable." If you don't happen to know who Brigham Young is, he was responsible for settling over 250 towns and villages in the western U.S. He challenged a man by the name of Lorenzo Snow to build a self-sustaining community. In the April 1877 General Conference, Brigham Young taught that building Zion included manufacturing all our consumer goods. Have you heard that in Sunday school? Here's the quote. What would be the first lesson necessary to teach the people were we to commence to direct their labors to the great end of becoming of one heart and one mind in the Lord, of establishing Zion and being filled with the power of God? It would be to stop purchasing the importations of Babylon. We can ourselves produce everything necessary for our consumption, our clothes, our convenience, and comfort right here at home. Then we shall become a self-sustaining and growing people, and we shall have to do it. And in the April 1867 General Conference, Apostle John Taylor said, quote, "What has been the teaching of this people for years? To be self-sustaining." Now, why did they think that being self-sustaining was crucially important? What's your guess? Why would being self-sustaining be important?
Not reliant on Babylon.
So, you got it. The answer is easily found in Revelation 18. The entire chapter, if you read Revelation 18, the entire chapter uses economic terms over and over and over and over again. And here's kind of the center of it all. Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn, because no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. So the brethren taught, hey, Babylon's going to fall. We need to be self-sustaining, because when it does, we don't want to go down with it. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first thing... So I gotta change brand. The first thing Lorenzo did with a handful of initial investors was to set up a co-op store. And then they invited anyone who produced anything in Brigham City to come sell their goods through the co-op store. And he invited everybody in town to buy 1 share, so that the profits would be distributed locally and the whole community would rise rather than some individual back east. So then he went on vacation to Hawaii for 3 years, I can't remember. And when he got back, there was $10,000 in the co-op savings account. So he took that money and built a tannery. And this is what was left of the building years and years later. And so they took hides from the local ranchers and produced everything you make out of leather and sold those goods to the co-op store, taking a portion of the profits back into the savings account, distributing a portion of the profits to all the shareholders in the community. So then once they got $20,000 in the bank account, they set up a woolen mill. This is actually the woolen mill down near St. George, but same idea. And then by their 10th year, this co-op had 40 different industries. There's a huge long list. I didn't include it. Now what's really amazing about this whole setup, which really sold it to me when I was reading about it, in their 10th year of operation, so they had these 40 departments, there was a worldwide recession. The Panic of 1873 began with the collapse of a railroad investment bank, and that kicked off financial collapse starting in the U.S. and it spread around the globe. In fact, this was recognized as the first truly global economic depression. Utah had, along with the rest of the country, had a 20% unemployment rate. Guess what Brigham City's unemployment rate was? 0. At the time I'm learning about this, I had neighbors losing their homes due to unemployment, and we couldn't help them. The co-op had its best year ever that year. And they, in fact, built homes for the widows and the orphans. And they gave work to the indigents passing through town. Why? Why were they so prosperous? Everyone else was hurting. It's because their board of directors estimated that they had achieved 85% self-sufficiency. So they were producing 85% of their consumer goods. Now, they didn't have iPhones. They didn't have air conditioning. But that's pretty impressive. Anyway, so seeing the success of the Brigham City Co-op, Brigham in 1868 gathered the merchants in Salt Lake City. He even invited the non-member merchants and challenged them to create what became Zion Cooperative Mercantile Institute, ZCMI, which technically was the first department store in the United States. It had over 150 retail stores throughout Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and everywhere else, and it was patterned after the Brigham City Co-op. And it became a huge success. In fact, that letter I was telling you about from the first presidency talked about the success of the ZCMI program. In fact, you can read it, and you can read a simplified version if you don't want to read the difficult version on my website, buildingzion.org. Under the menu of the reading list, it's there. They moved about the equivalent of $50 million worth of goods, and everyone in Utah was urged to buy 1 share in the co-op. But that's not all. The LDS leaders urged their members to embrace cooperative free enterprise. And by the late 1870s, nearly every business owned by a Latter-day Saint in the Mountain West was converted to a cooperative. In fact, I don't know if you can read this, but every one of these stores has Holiness to the Lord, Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institute. So they were all absorbed into ZCMI, basically. So Brigham Young and church members converted the entire economy of the Mountain West into cooperative free enterprise. But why? What was their motivation? This really blew my mind when I discovered this. April 1869 General Conference, Brigham said, "This cooperative movement is only a stepping stone to what is called the Order of Enoch, but which is in reality the Order of Heaven." October 1873, Wilford Woodruff, "We must give our earnest support to cooperation, for it is a step in advance toward the establishment of the Order of Enoch and the building up of the Zion of God." John Taylor, 1878. This time he's the prophet. What was the principle of cooperation intended for? Simply as a stepping stone for the United Order. That is all. That we might be united and operate together in the interest of building up Zion. Pretty remarkable. It was all about building Zion, getting the saints used to working together as one in the realm of economics. So President George Buchanan, April 1869 General Conference. A great many of the Latter-day Saints scarcely understand the persistency with which the presidency of the church has labored to bring about the oneness of the people in temporal things. And this cooperative movement is an important step in this direction. It has already produced greater union, and it will produce still greater union than anything that has been witnessed among us. And if we carry it out in the spirit in which it has been taught us, it will produce immense results. Then George A. Smith, 1873 General Conference, October. "Can we not unite a little in erecting a factory and establishing a store? Can we not learn step by step the principles of unity, which will enable us to be the people of God, like the Zion of Enoch, and prepare us for a dwelling with the blessed? Let us consider these things and sustain with all our power all the efforts that are made to bring about a unity among the saints. Every step we take of this kind is in the right direction. Sustain our cooperative stores and cease to sustain those who do not build up Zion." President John Taylor, 1878, the year after Brigham's death. Well, the time is passing. But before I close, I wish to say a word or two in regard to this cooperation in temporal things. Let us be one. For the Lord has plainly told us, "If you are not one, you are not mine." You've never heard these ideas in terms of economics, have you? In my research, I found 7 quotes showing they valued cooperation because it helped to avoid the dangerous division of the people into the rich and poor classes. Here's 3. Brigham, April 1869 General Conference. Have you noticed all of these quotes are from General Conference? What does that tell you? Quote, "I want to impress one thing on the minds of the people, which will be for their advantage if they will hear it. When you start your cooperative store in a ward, you will find the men of capital stepping forward, and one says, 'I'll put in $10,000, and another says, 'I'll put in $5,000. But I say unto you, bishops, do not let these men take 5,000 or 1,000 in stock, but call upon the brethren and sisters who are poor, and tell them to put their $5 in, their $25 in. And let those who have capital stand back and give the poor the advantage. This is what I am after, and have been all the time." President George Buchanan, 1872 October General Conference. You can see already the effects of the partial introduction of something akin to the Order of Enoch within cooperation. We have had that established in our midst, and what are its effects? We witness a gradual diffusion of capital throughout the community, greatly benefiting all its members. One of the effects of this, which we witness, is that wealth does not increase rapidly in the hands of the few, and that the poor are not kept in so much poverty. Apostle Charles C. Rich, who I'd never heard of until I did all this research, in 1877, it is not God's will that one should be lifted up and another put down, one be made rich and another poor. We have to keep this principle in our view in our cooperative labors and be one, or we are not the Lord's. It is the purpose of the Lord to build up the poor, and these principles are revealed for its accomplishment. If 20 or 30 persons engage in business and we make them more wealthy and others poor, what difference is there between us and the Gentiles? If we do as is done in the world, wherein are we better than they? If we carry out the principle of cooperation with unselfishness of spirit and singleness of heart, it will build us up and the poor also. So our early LDS leaders taught that our motives matter when we embrace cooperation. Lorenzo Snow, October 1873 General Conference. In temporal administration, the same as in spiritual, one should exhibit in his labors a self-sacrificing principle when necessary. That is, he should show that he labors for the interests of the people rather than for building himself up. Erastus Snow. Do you have a picture? Yep. April 1875 General Conference. It is not great dividends that are going to make any of our cooperative associations prosperous, permanent, and successful, but honesty, straightforward business habits, and contentment with reasonable profits and rewards for our labors. John Taylor, 1879. I will tell you, Latter-day Saints, that unless we can enter into our cooperative institutions with singleness of heart and pure motives, as the elders do when they go out in the mission field to preach the gospel, because it is God's command, your efforts will be of small avail. We do not want to stop and ask, is there money in it? Is it His will, His law, and principle? When we combine our interests in this principle and work to it, we will succeed and prosper. In 1874, 3 years before his death, Brigham decided the saints were ready to take the next step in economic unity. So we began organizing the saints into united orders, of which there were 4 or 5 types. I don't remember how many. Sadly, within 2 years, 90% of the united orders failed. Here's why I think that is. I think Brigham rushed it. It took the Israelites 40 years of wandering in the wilderness for the older generation to die off. Those who were addicted to the flesh pots of Egypt. Had Brigham, this is my opinion, had Brigham run the co-ops for 40 years instead of about 10, maybe the saints would have been ready to go to the next level. Having cooperation become normalized among the general population and allowing time for the older generations addicted to competitive free enterprise to die off. Our scriptures and prophets teach us that the United Order is a celestial law, and as such will be practiced in the New Jerusalem Zion Society. Wouldn't it be a good idea to get a running start, getting used to operating in a cooperative economy? If there was only somewhere where we could practice that. Now, in my research, I learned something I've never heard in Sunday school, and after Brigham dies, John Taylor became the prophet, and he doesn't give up on achieving economic unity, even though most of the United Orders have failed. President Taylor apparently noticed how Brigham's United Orders were mostly led by bishops, who at the time tended to be farmers, who knew very little about operating a business, much less a cooperative. What he did, he instead invited the businessmen locally to participate in what he created, which was called the Zion Central Board of Trade. And I'll give all the money in my pocket to anyone who's ever heard of that who didn't read my book first. Nobody. It's kind of weird. He took this practical approach. He had seen the success of the Cache Valley Board of Trade, which was inspired by the Brigham City Co-op, and he saw it as a means of preparing the people to take a second run at the United Orders down the road. He organized local businessmen in every state to serve on these local boards of trade, and their task, among other things, was to set up co-ops that would give people jobs and produce goods and services that the community needed. The Central Board of Trade, the Central Board of Trade, and you can read about this in Wikipedia. I actually authored this article after doing a bunch of research on it. The Central Board of Trade did a whole lot of research, which ended up resulting in the iron mission in Cedar City, the sugar industry in Utah, and I can't remember what else. They also negotiated contracts with the railroads because there were a bunch of railroads being built around. Anyway, it was going gangbusters until the late 1880s when the U.S. government shut the whole economic thing down that the church was doing. Okay, so we see that cooperation wasn't just a Brigham Young thing. His successor went back to setting up co-ops. After Brigham's death, he stated, quote, "During the lifetime of Brigham Young, several years ago, it seemed as though he was wrought upon to introduce cooperation and the United Order to quite an extent. He told us at that time that it was the word and will of God to us. I believed it then, I believe it now." End quote. So, if we accept the early Utah LDS leaders' perspective that cooperatives are a stepping stone to Zion's economic order, and if we hope to qualify ourselves to live in a future Zion society, and since our community is organized as a cooperative, then couldn't we view our town as an immersive classroom to learn to live higher economic values than we're taught in our dog-eat-dog competitive free enterprise system? I can hear it now, but Jesse, the current prophet, hasn't told us to build Zion or even a pre-Zion. True, he hasn't. Though Joseph Smith said we ought to have the building up of Zion as our greatest object. And Brigham Young said, "There is not one thing wanting in all the works of God's hands to make a Zion upon the earth when the people conclude to make it." Who's making the decision? The people. 1940, Apostle John A. Winston said that seeking to bring forth and establishing the cause of Zion, quote, "is our business, the business of the Latter-day Saints." In April 1996 General Conference, Elder Jeffrey R. Holland opined, "We may not yet be the Zion of which our prophets foretold, but we long for it and we keep working toward it." In the October 2002 General Conference, Bishop Keith P. Mullen said the establishment of Zion should be the aim of every member of this church. Zion is established and flourishes because of the God-inspired lives and labors of its citizens. Zion comes not as a gift, but because a virtuous covenant people are drawn together and build it. Doesn't sound like it's coming from headquarters. Elder David R. Stone, that's right. We can live as a Zion people if we wish to. I don't know about you, but I would wish to. So I would ask, would intentionally working as a community to learn the principles of cooperation to prepare ourselves for a future Zion society, would that be a good thing? Or would waiting to be commanded be the right approach? Or could we get anxiously engaged in this good cause and do many things of our own free will and bring to pass much righteousness, For the power is in us, and we are agents unto ourselves. Now, what I'm proposing is not without precedent. Many of the church's most inspired programs didn't begin at headquarters. They began among the saints themselves. Seminary started as an idea at a high school in Granite, Utah. Family home evening, practiced by many faithful families before it was ever a policy. The Young Women Organization started in 1869 in Farmington, Utah by local church members. The Young Men's Program resulted from local efforts in Salt Lake City and elsewhere, where elders or bishops organized youth activities, including lectures, service opportunities, and moral education. When the saints prove an idea works, the church often lifts it up and spreads it worldwide. Brigham Young would have loved Riverbed Ranch. I'll give you 2 quotes showing why I say that. He spoke in general conference on how he would like to set up something similar to what we've tried to do here. Or at least I've tried to do here. It's unofficial, okay? In 1872, Brigham said, "Suppose we should say to a few of the Latter-day Saints, if we could find those who would answer that purpose, how would you like to build up a stake of Zion, a little city of Enoch? How would you like this? Would you like to enter into a covenant and into contracts according to the law of the land? And let us bind ourselves together to go into a systematic cooperative system, not only in merchandising, but in farming and in all our mechanical work and in every trade and business there is. And we will gather together a few hundred families and start." How would the Latter-day Saints like it? Do you think there could be any found who would be willing to do this? Let me say to you, my brethren, I have a very fine place to start such a society, and I would like to make a deed of this property to such a society, and enter into a covenant with men of God and men of women, or women of God, that would go to and show the world and show the Latter-day Saints how to build up a city of Zion. The next year, he described our opportunity perfectly well. "Brethren, if you will start here and operate together in farming and making cheese and herding sheep and cattle and every other kind of work, and get a factory here and a cooperative store and operate together in sheep raising, storekeeping, manufacturing, and everything else, no matter what it is, by and by, when we can plant ourselves on a foundation that we cannot be broken up," I think he means self-reliance, self-sustaining, "and we shall then proceed to arrange a family organization for which we are not quite yet prepared," he's talking about the United Order, "you know, right here in this place, commence to carry on your business in a cooperative capacity. In every instance, I could show every one of you what a great advantage would be gained in working together. Well, we can do this and keep up cooperation, and by, when we can, we will build up a city after the order of Enoch." What could go wrong? President George Buchanan taught, "God has commanded us to forsake Babylon. He has called us out of Babylon. But though we have come out of Babylon, we have brought to a great extent Babylon with us." The love of Babylon, the love of that which God abhors, and which he commands us to forsake. We have brought it with us, and to a great extent we cherish it. And this is the great obstacle in the way of building up Zion. More recently, in his landmark talk, April 1889, "Beware of Pride," President Benson identified the number one obstacle to our building Zion: pride. Quote, "My dear brethren and sisters, we must prepare to redeem Zion. It was essentially the sin of pride that kept us from establishing Zion in the days of the prophet Joseph Smith. It was the same sin of pride that brought consecration to an end among the Nephites. Pride is the great stumbling block to Zion. I repeat, pride is the great stumbling block to Zion. We must cleanse the inner vessel by conquering pride." No problem, right? That's easy, huh? So let's do a little logical exercise. Where's the line between Babylon and Zion? This was a question I was asking myself. I was writing a whole series of newspaper articles called Thoughts on Zion. And one of the first things I talked about was, where is the line? How do we know when we've crossed over from Babylon into Zion? How do we know? President Benson said, pride is the stumbling block to Zion. Elder D. Todd Christofferson said that Babylon is the opposite of Zion. Given these two things, what can we conclude? If these two things are true, what can we conclude? Little logical fun exercise here. Any takers? Oh, that one, I gave that one away. Sorry. Well, pride must be a stepping stone to Babylon. How I got that is I took this one and I took the opposite of a stumbling block, stepping stone, and I took the opposite of Zion, Babylon. Does this sound true? Pride is the stepping stone to Babylon. It does sound true. Then humility must be the stepping stone to Zion. And then humility is also a stumbling block to Babylon. So the line is the line between pride and humility. I could give a whole talk about this idea right here. So the big challenge I see in Riverbed Ranch or any other community that wants to be a preparatory Zion community is the reality that we bring our values with us. Just like death and marriage, you bring your values with you. Sure, we all apparently value self-reliance and community, but for generations our families have been steeped in Babylon's principles, and it's likely that we unknowingly harbor many of them in our hearts without intention. Most of our social institutions, which condition us daily, schools, businesses, governments, they all train us in values that would be out of place in a Zion society. Our cultural value of getting ahead encourages us to ignore the needs of our neighbors. Our culture's drive for profit has corrupted every social institution there is: education, religion, government, business, even nonprofits. For example, our food industry sells us products with harmful chemicals in them. Why? To preserve shelf life. Why? To maximize profits. Another example is that nearly all our national legislation is written by lobbyists trying to get the government to help them preserve their cash cows. Religions. Well, I better stop there. Just like the Israelites who brought Egyptian values with them into the wilderness, we may be bringing our non-Zion values here. Babylon trains us to value leaving government to the politicians, leaving our education to the experts, and leaving our protection to the police. When seconds count, police are minutes away. Babylon trains us to be dependent and to be good consumers and to look out for number one. So how do we identify those values Babylon has soaked us with? Well, this would take a whole nother hour, but I'll make it very brief. I only have 2 slides on this. This is my friend Barry Eaton and his wife Carol. I used to give seminars way back in the early 90s on how to work with the Spirit to eliminate what we referred to as false beliefs. We helped people identify and replace those false beliefs with the truth, hopefully as witnessed by the Spirit. Today, professionals call a similar process cognitive behavior therapy. We were doing it long before. Barry and I called it belief work. From the moment we wake up in the morning until we fall asleep at night, we are often subconsciously driven, and I mean driven, by inaccurate assumptions we made as children during great times of stress. Your dad yelled at you, "Why are you so stupid?" And so you spend the rest of your life trying to prove to yourself and to your dad and to everyone else that you're not stupid. Now, there's a million examples of that. The truth, though, is empowering. Falsehoods bring discord both internally and externally. Typically, you know you're running on a false belief when one of your buttons gets triggered. and you get offended, angry, or jealous. So if everyone in the community were to work through all their childhood baggage, there would be peace throughout the land because there would be no discord in their hearts. You might say they would be pure in heart. So let me share with you a tool I found that is the fastest way to identify and eliminate false assumptions that are ruining your peace. It was developed by a lady named Byron Katie, and it's called the Judge Your Neighbor Worksheet. And you use it when you're really upset about something. So print these out, keep them handy, and when you get mad at somebody, grab one of these and start working through it. Let me give you a personal example of how this changed my life in one instance. So I've been doing website marketing forever, and I had a client back in 2003, 2004. The guy was a jerk. He was just plain jerk. Okay? And every week we had to have this 2-3 hour team meeting, and I'm thinking the whole time I could be doing the work I'm supposed to be doing for you during these 2 or 3 hours instead of sitting and listening to you belittle everyone in the group on the phone, right? It was a phone call. So by the end of every one of those meetings, it was always on Tuesday morning, I was furious at this guy every time. So finally I thought, oh, I know what to do. So I printed one of these out. You get them online for free. Download them. Just search for Judge Your Neighbor Worksheet. Print it out. I worked through this. After that, he didn't bother me at all, not one bit. In that one thing, I was, you could say, born again. Different person. So by using this tool and other methods, you can massively increase the peace in your life and become what I believe is more pure in heart. So I want to invite the community to engage with Riverbed Ranch as if it were a Zion prep community, working together towards this shared vision. I mean, why not? And here's why. We're living in a telestial world, soaking in our telestial level economic system. If we think we're magically going to be comfortable in a celestial society, we're fooling ourselves. That is a huge leap. We would be wise to master what they referred to as the stepping stone to Zion. Cooperative free enterprise. So what if Riverbed Ranch and the cooperative model that we're testing out isn't just about us? What if we're the proving ground for something bigger? If we can demonstrate that cooperation prepares us for Zion, maybe, just maybe, the Lord will say, it's time. Share this with everyone. These are just 3 ideas off the top of my head of things we could do. We could create our own more Zion-like social institutions like a freedom-based school, although everyone here homeschools, so maybe that's not necessary. We could take training on this belief work and learn how to purify our hearts. We could organize our own Central Board of Trade to create co-ops and fill local needs and provide jobs. So how can I start building Zion today? What can you do? You could study quotes about Zion building on my blog, buildingzion.org, or you could read my book, Champions for Zion. I wrote it about 5-6 years ago. Occasionally I'll pick it up and open it up and just start reading wherever, and I'm just amazed at the things they taught. Just amazed. Also, you could print out a few Judge Your Neighbor worksheets and have them handy. Byron Katie has a ton of videos, I assume they're still there, on YouTube, where she helps people through the process. After you rant and rave and spew all your yuck on the piece of paper, then she has you go through and figure out, okay, why do you feel this way? What's the problem and what's the solution? And anyway, so she has YouTube videos that show her helping people go through that process. Also, you could invite a family you don't know to dinner and get to know them as people. My journey towards Zion began with a deep burning desire to seek after it. I hope that you might have that desire as well. So, question and answer time. Here's some questions I thought maybe somebody might want to ask if you can't think of any.
I want to know that you said free base school, training on belief work, and what was it, they're going to create a central what?
A central board of trade. So basically, a group of successful businessmen who know how to set up companies, to set up co-ops, to provide jobs locally, and produce goods and services that are needed locally. I mean, basically, your husband did that on his own with the concrete plant. Any other questions? Yes.
What about the last one with the redistribution of wealth? I guess what was different in how Brigham Young organized it compared to what the government tries to do with socialism?
What the best example of this is what John Taylor did. So you know who's the guy that has he's one of the richest men in the world. Lives in a small house, drives an old car.
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. Okay. Warren Buffett loves doing what he does. He doesn't need the money. He loves doing what he does. What John Taylor would do is go to Warren Buffett and say, wow, you've done really well. Could you help other people do what you're doing? It's called I call it a redirection of wealth's power. That's what John Taylor did with the Board of Trade. He said, he gathered the local businessmen and said, now, you guys got this down. Not everybody's good in the marketplace. Not everybody's good at setting up businesses, and not everybody's good at it. But these guys are. Let's redirect their focus on helping everyone else.
Governments love to redistribute wealth through taxes. So they'll take from the rich and give to the poor. And that gift is for doing nothing, generally, through credits or whatever, or welfare. Brigham Young, though, when he gave the quote, take the man who's got $10,000 and the man who's got $5,000 and they want to start up a business and say, no, step away. Let's take the $5 from the poor or the $25 from the widow and say, you guys invest. These men can give direction on how that business can be run, but they can't take all the profits.
Right.
You guys put what you got in and take some of those profits, and that will build. That's how we redistribute wealth, where everybody gets to participate in
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But what's cool is
that was
somebody
very
that
well
knows how
said.
to do it is teaching them.
Yeah.
It's like, don't tell me to go figure out how to do technology. Will you walk me through it?
Yeah. Yeah. Good example. Yes, Mark.
So we don't put the cart before the horse. We as prideful citizens of Babylon need to realize the transitioning process. What are the top three? So that cart doesn't be put before the horse. Because I think some of us look at the history of the church, and sometimes they did. They put the cart before us and then it messed things up.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I want to build as much as you do, Jesse. I want to do that most sincerely. What are the top three things that does not put the cart before the horse that we can combine and bring members into our cooperative who may not understand or know the Latter-day Saint history of consecration? What are those top three, and what must we do as individuals to make sure those are put in the process in the right order?
I haven't thought through that question. It's a fantastic question. Off the top of my head, President Benson said, pride is the great stumbling block to Zion. And he repeated that phrase. He's trying to drive it home. There's a scripture in the DNC, I believe, I can't remember where it is. It says, if you will rid yourself of, it basically mentions three things, pride, envy, and something else. The veil will be rent and you will see me and know that I am. That's a pretty cool promise. So maybe those three are the ones we need to focus on.
Maybe
But I
we
would
need to
definitely
understand
say
humility too.
there needs to be a
Humility,
process in place.
Better understand humility.
Yeah. There needs to be a process in place so that the friction between people can be resolved easily, quickly. And in my view, when we did trainings for people with this belief work thing, we were doing visualizations and rant and rave and other things. But this one works the best that I've found. It's quick and it really gets you thinking, and it gives the Spirit the opportunity to teach you what the truth is. And when that truth changes you, can I tell your story?
Sure.
Oh my gosh. So I'm unemployed at the time, looking for jobs. I go upstairs. We had, one or two kids? Two kids, I think. We're living in a townhouse in Orem. And I go upstairs. For some reason, they put the phone, we're renting this place, they put the phone in the master bedroom. So I go in the master bedroom to use the phone. My wife is laying in the bed with the pillow over her head, and she's shaking. And I thought, she is having a seizure. I had no idea. I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? Come to find out, it was thundering and lightning outside. As a child, she watched the movies, Ben-Hur and Ten Commandments. Mm-hmm. And as a child, you're really good at seeing what's going on, but you're really bad at interpreting it, right? She interpreted from that, God is angry. As an adult, she didn't realize she had taken on that belief as a child and was freaking out.
God's angry with me.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't know. I just transferred that. Like, I was scared of that. Anyway.
And so...
but yeah, I didn't know it.
So we worked through the issue, explored it, come to find out, she figured that out. The next time there was thunder and lightning, she was sitting on the front porch with our kids counting the distance between the flash and the boom. In that one thing, she was born again. A new person. You're changing the operating system. So really, I don't know what 2 and 3 are, but this is number 1.
Thank you.
Purify the heart. Get rid of all the junk.
Can I throw out some suggestions
No, we're
that
busy.
have come to mind? Because I thought I've heard that don't do for others what they can do for themselves. But at the same time, they had everyone contribute equally. And so I think it's something having to do with those things that we can't. It divides the classes when we give welfare, so to speak, right? The rich just giving. But we elevate them when we learn and we teach. We work together. We help them learn and
them.
teach,
Yeah.
right? And so there are a lot of ways out here, which I know you guys, the founders, the idea was behind that,
With the educational nonprofit.
Yeah, and with doing everything, like, Phil knows how to do all the electrical, and we came here and thought, oh, it's great, he'll
Just do it for us.
he'll do it for us. But he
Wasn't
told
the case.
Gary, come take a picture of my stuff.
And then go
you
do it.
do it.
He did that
That's
to
how I
us too.
set my solar system.
But then he came over and checked and said, okay, you need to change this and this.
I
But
didn't
now-
do that part.
Cost us $10,000.
But now he could teach someone that doesn't know, And if we all learn something and we teach 2 people and they teach 2 people and it goes on, I think that was your vision, right? To help people to learn and everyone rises.
Other questions, comments? Sir.
So earlier we were talking a little bit about the Great Basin Kingdom.
Mhm.
And in that book it talks about the Brigham City Co-op, and towards the end it says, well, like, what happened? And it says, like, the federal government conquered Zion, right?
Basically.
And so in 2025, like, you technically can't prepare food in church buildings, like you can only heat them up or heat it up. So how how is that same thing not going to happen? You know, like, isn't it even worse now? Just like the regulations, like we're kind of beholden to maintaining this like 501c3 status. It's almost like you'd have to subvert not only the federal government but also like the institution itself in order to make something like that happen.
Can you give me an example? I'm not sure.
I mean, like if we can't use our own resources to, like, we don't have the freedom to use our own resources to, like, prepare food in our buildings, how can we?
Well,
how's the same thing not going to happen again? Where
if everybody pitched in $50, we could buy all we need for a what do they call it, an industrial kitchen or whatever it's called. You know,
But don't
we
pitch
can
in
follow the
10%?
laws and still do it. The laws are restrictive, but we're smart. We can figure out how to do it. We can figure it out. I don't know if I'm answering your concern, but
No, I'm
trying.
I don't know that there's a good answer.
Okay. Yes.
Well, when they talked about the Brigham City experiment,
Yeah.
there seems like at some point there's a tipping point. And as if we've kind of like staggered around here like little toddlers, like there's kind of this like, well, we maybe can't get some of these going until we have enough humans here. So I want to have you tell me a little bit more about the people of Brigham City, how many people there were, how long did this take, and what was their process?
Well, here's what I know, and I got it from the book Great Basin Kingdom, which was written by Leonard J. Arrington. If you're interested in economics, it's a great read. I was. So Brigham told Lorenzo Snow, who I believe was bishop at the time, or became bishop, here's a whole bunch of Scandinavian immigrants, go build a town and do it. So they were culturally united as a people, which was helpful. I don't know how many people were there. They did take that group and plop them down in a little, what do we call that in English? A small town. Dorf in German. What's the English word?
Suburb?
Little tiny town.
Village.
Cottage village?
Village. Yeah, a little village. I think there were like 100 people there or something. And then they brought all these immigrants together. So I don't know how many people were there. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
How important is it to begin soon as we can to build a cooperative mercantile?
Well, that's a challenge because right now, who's producing products that we could sell? I mean, we can import products, which would be good because, I mean, that's what they did. The Brigham City Co-op also brought in products from back east and sold them at a fair markup. I think it was 10% instead of 500%.
They had 40. You said they had 40 type of
Departments.
40 departments. Can you tell us the top 10 that they started out with?
I couldn't tell you that.
What was the most important out of those 40
Yeah.
that we need to implement quickly first?
Yeah, I wish. No, I don't know.
Well, they had a tannery, they had
Right.
they had wool, they had sheep, they had cattle.
Yeah, I think that's where we need to begin. Is something
They had
that
sugar beets.
Yeah,
leather making.
There's a whole. You can Google it,
Yeah.
and you can see what those 40 departments were. I don't remember,
Oh, that's
and
wrong.
I don't think it's in. I don't think it's given in order. That would be helpful.
would it give a date maybe when they began?
I believe it was 1863, because their 10th year was that economic depression. Yes.
Is there any sort of centralized internal group for those that are already here that people share, oh, I want to make this, or I want to contribute this down the road, or I'm selling goat milk, or whatever?
We have a lot of Facebook group or Facebook Messenger groups. We started out with 2 or 3, and now I think there's 95.
There is.
Not that many. But they do talk about that. There's one called Marketplace, our Marketplace, and so people who are selling things. Right now, though, we're not other than concrete, we're not producing anything big like machinery or clothing, or it's like soaps and
Bread,
herbs,
eggs.
which are helpful.
Bread.
Eggs are great because most of us eat eggs.
Bread.
Bread.
So you've thought about this more than for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
You've been thinking about this for a long time.
Yeah.
As part of the idea of coming to Riverbed was one of your ideas.
For me.
Yes. And so as you've thought about this, the plan forward, I think we keep like jumping ahead over and over again.
As a community.
Yeah, collectively. And I really appreciate the idea about, because you don't even realize that you need to walk away from Babylon until you come here. So one of the things that we have that's really interesting is that we have people that are off-ranchies, who are part of our shareholders, but they're off-ranchies. And they have a very different opinion of what should be done with the off-ranchies. There's like this very subtle tension, or sometimes not so subtle. Because you don't like understand. It's like you don't.
You don't get it.
You don't get it. Yeah, it's like you don't understand until you get here, and there are these things that start working on you.
Yeah.
And then, so I've heard about this before, and I've talked to other people about this before. Like the process, we always seem like, oh, we've got to hurry up and start working. Like, Mark's always like, he's a doer. Let's make the cooperative right now. But as I've thought about it, it seems like this, like the changing of the heart has to happen first, and that's going to be a very lengthy process, or it can be.
It can be.
And then,
But
so
we've
what do you-
been taught the gospel for generations. Don't we get it? I mean, don't we get that we should be forgiving? Don't we get that we should be kind? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been a member of the church for 50-something years. I've heard
But
all the
here and
lessons.
here are not the same
Yeah,
thing.
but you change your heart by going out and help somebody pull the plastic up over their greenhouse.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's what changes my heart.
Yeah.
And it brings you joy.
That's what makes me happy, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, so I apologize from like chat. So I mean, so what do you see as the as you thought
Well,
about it? What
here-
is the time? What is
Okay,
the running?
Being
plan?
an entrepreneur and seeing the Zion Central Board of Trade and what it accomplished, my thought was, in fact, I've mentioned it once or twice to a few people, setting up a board of trade of successful business people, so I probably wouldn't be on it, who could look at the community and say, okay, what does this community need, and how can we organize a co-op to do it? I've approached a few people who do software programming and said, hey, why don't we do a coders co-op and actually bring income into the community? And that way, and I'd like to have the youth learn how to do programming so they'll be willing to stay here. I know this is a tangent. Do we have time? Are we done? This is a tangent, but I think it's worth it. There were two sociologists who moved to a tiny town in Iowa to figure out why are all these small towns in America drying up and blowing away. I mean, you see pictures after pictures of downtown in these towns, and all the stores are closed. They're all boarded up. Why? And so what they figured out, it's blowing your mind, they interviewed everybody and finally figured out what the problem was. The school. What's the mantra in school?
Go out, get educated, go away, and become successful.
Bingo. So what's the opposite of that? Here's some skills. Stay here with us. So with this Coders Co-op, I want to involve the older teens and say, here's a skill you can learn if you're interested. Include them in the programming team. So they're on Discord with the programming team. They've got a task they get to do. Somebody's helping them do it. They learn to do it. They get paid. Maybe they'll stay here. I mean, we want this community to last. We don't want to send them away to college so they can get a good job, so they can get a good career, so they can live in a big city.
I don't know if anybody's interested. I can list all 40, or I can just list the first three. In 1870, Boots and shoes were the first ones started.
So that's in the tannery.
Yeah, 1872, work clothes, mountaineer overalls. Dry goods in 1869, or dry goods, sorry, it wasn't, they haven't put this in order, sorry. Clothing, 1869, groceries, 1869,
So they
footwear,
were- yeah.
1869, Queenswear, I'm not sure what that is, 1869, construction materials, 1869, food preservation products, 1869, furniture, draperies, carpets, wagons, machinery, sewing machines, beauty products, all 1869.
Nice.
There's
Sounds
a
like
good
they were
book,
booming then.
a good children's book that gets your mind going on this called Children of the Dust Bowl, and how somebody helped them, these Okies that were, you know,
Displaced to California.
yeah, but helped them to grow and succeed, and created a school and brought in people to teach them what we're teaching here. You know, how to butcher. The chemistry teacher taught how to make makeup. I mean, taught them how to sew and make their shoes. And anyway, I think it really adds to what we're seeking to become self-reliant. But it was a really beautiful, true story.
Well, it's exciting. We can do it. We totally can. Look at all these good people out here. We're starting to do it.
Yeah. We do. There is a group that's looking to do a co-op store, build a small building. It needs a board of trade, I think, to coordinate. I really, that's my opinion, is I really think we need a board of trade managed by successful business people who've done it before, who've made it happen before, and of course there obviously could input from the community, but yeah, that's my opinion.
It's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess you're here in this community, but say tomorrow for some reason you had to leave and live in like a suburb. Like, what have you learned living here, like that you could maybe implement on like a smaller scale, if you had to go back or something? Like, I guess, what can I do? Because I don't know if I can live here tomorrow, I guess, but is there like would you set up like a little...
I'd go get a job for a co-op.
Or just get a job for a co-op?
Yeah, REI Sportswear is a co-op. IFA is a co-op. The grocery store, Winco is a co-op. I went into Winco in Orem, and I was looking for something and asked the lady to help me that works there. And then I said, "So you're a co-owner of this place?" She goes, "Yeah."
Yeah.
But she was telling me all about it and how excited she was to be a co-owner of Winco. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would do.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just curious, like how the legal structure would be even set up to like do a co-op. Is like to do it here? Did you guys talk to a lawyer, or how did that?
Oh yeah, yeah, we did. The co-op, the lawyer that was hired, had been doing agricultural co-ops for 30 years. I called him and said, "So, have you ever seen one of these fail?" And he said, "Never. One sold out, but none of them have ever failed that he set up."
Okay. Wow.
Honestly, I think some of the financial requirements of co-ops are burdensome. Keeping track of everything that everyone buys or sells. I'm not a bookkeeper or an accountant. I don't play one on TV. I actually hate doing it. I do my taxes, my bookkeeping in December between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
Because I hate it. And maybe it's okay, but it seems to me that an LLC created to act like a co-op would be better because you don't have to track everybody's everything.
Right. Okay.
But that's my opinion.
Yeah. So like a family LLC that acts like a co-op, something like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know where you live, but I was just reading that Snuck Farm in Provo is accepting farm volunteers, and you get a share of the produce as you go and help. Anyway, just they're accepting volunteers, but in exchange for the produce that you help. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah. Cool.
That's cool.
You've been quiet. Do you have questions? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Thank you.